All right, welcome back to the Four Elements Press reporting. Today we have back Donald Campbell, who just came off of his race for Assembly in New Jersey in the primary. We'll find out how that went. We'll learn about what it takes to kind of be on a ticket, because many of you might be interested in running for something where you are, and we encourage you to, because everyone is needed. And he'll talk a little bit about the upcoming healthcare Senate vote on the Senate budget bill and how that will impact everyone who relies on hospitals generally, and a little bit more
Healthcare in
specifically.
general. Healthcare in general. If you let healthcare, that's what it'll impact, yes. Well, thanks for having me again, Alex. And I did do my first run. I did not win the primary. So there's your spoiler alert if anybody was following New Jersey politics. But I appreciate if you're out there and you voted for me. And even if you didn't vote for me, I appreciate you for voting because voting's so important because we need more people with all different types of backgrounds in the decision-making role, and that's why I ran. And if you're thinking about running, you should think about it because there's no reason why you can't do it. It's a bit of a process. You gotta get signatures, you gotta meet people, you gotta do some things, and you gotta know the issues. But there's no reason why you can't if that's something you're interested in. But do some research first before you um, jump in and meet cool people. And just keep in mind, running is the point. If you lose, you lose. Elevating issues is the point. So it's not all about winning, although you certainly would like to. But Steve Forbes, who also unfortunately lost his race for governor, always told me you lose before you win in politics. So that's why it's important to keep that in mind because you build over time. And you know, there may be a next time. I don't know if I'll ever do it again. Alex here is planning my next campaign after this podcast, but I don't know. But yeah, so keep it up. And we're going to talk about this bill because it's very important for people to know, especially with disability. Of course, as a nonprofit, I don't endorse or not endorse the bill. But I do want to give people information so you know what's out there and you know that what people with disabilities are experiencing because information's information and we have to stick to the facts.
Yeah, yeah. And before we jump into the bill, I wanted to ask, what has kind of the message been from the Full Up campaign since you were on their ticket? Do they have plans of running again or have plans of uh, running you
Yeah,
again?
yeah. And so far, Steve is on vacation. And if you don't know Steve's story, he's been running for governor. He was the first one to jump in. So he's been running. He started running like 2 years ago. So he told us he's taken a bit of a step back, which I understand because he's probably not had a real day off or a real week off, especially since 2 years. And you gotta come down off adrenaline. It's like a big up and down. But Steve, you know, I will always appreciate the opportunity. His team was great, Lisa and Janie and Andrew. If they ever see this, they're awesome people. And one thing I really learned is that, you really intimidate yourself. You say to yourself, I don't belong. Even, what am I going to do running for office? These people don't pay attention to me. But you find the right candidate and you can find the right people and you can have an opportunity. I'm so glad I did it despite the outcome because you meet people and Alex knows this in life. Like the growth is challenged. Like that's what that lets you meet people, getting out of your comfort zone. Because people believe this or not, I'm actually more introverted than people think. Like, not that I don't mind being social. I just need to recharge my batteries a lot. So like, it takes a lot for me to put myself out there like that. If somebody's like, oh. I would never want to spend the week in my house alone. I'm like, oh, that sounds pretty decent. Like, like I could survive. But I'm so glad I did it, and it's really important for us to be, especially as people with disabilities or LGBTQ. to be out there, or any marginalized community to be out there, because these decisions affect us, as we'll talk about in this bill.
Yeah, and even just a takeaway from your race, get in contact with someone who is running, who
Right.
might have more of a platform and more of a campaign, because they might be interested in having another fighter on the ground who's just in
But
their corner that they can support, that will support them, and you'll get each other voters.
right, and I would tell if somebody's thinking, where do I start? Depending on your political party, Google the club in your area. There's probably a Democrat club or a Republican club or whatever. I mean, there's so much in social media. I mean, I've really started using Chat GPT a lot. Not that I wasn't using it before, but it is amazing the level of information we have at our fingertips. So, like, see what's out there and just get started. You don't have to run. There are always campaigns looking for help or always volunteer opportunities, but it is healthy to there's so much going on and so much that we're concerned about going on. It's important to not only be informed, but to take that next step and to not only be informed and be passionate, but to actually do stuff. And it's a lot healthier than just getting angry or upset, to channel it into something healthy. And when you go out, you realize you're not alone. And then you realize because you can feel very alone, but you're not. So that's why it's. And I always said I ran in part for therapy reasons, for like to find something function to do, and it did help because it forces you to get out of a negative space. So, and you don't have to run. Don't think, oh my God, I don't want to run. That's my only option. No, there's plenty of ways to be engaged in your community. Joining a book club is civic engagement. Like it doesn't have to be, you know, politics, but you should always pay attention to it because it affects you, especially if you're in any type of marginalized community, because these decisions not only affect you, but they disproportionately affect you. So, you're going to get the brunt of it. The super rich are not going to get the brunt of these decisions. They're going to be fine. But the people who are going to deal with the consequences are going to be people in marginalized communities or people in lower set socioeconomic statuses. So, unfortunately, even if you're just sitting here and you're like, I'm not interested in politics, unfortunately, politics is interested in you. So, so you have to be engaged.
Yeah, think about going to committee meetings, local committee meetings, getting involved that way, get involved with local things like the LGBTQ caucus in your area if there is one. If there's not one,
Start
that's
one.
opportunity to start one. Even in densely populated areas,
Yeah,
in
we're all
counties, you might get 4 or 5 members, but those 4 or 5 members could organize a whole day long event for the whole community. They
right.
could do fundraising, you
And
know?
if you're LGBTQ plus and you're like, well, I live in a very conservative spot, that's more of a reason for you to start one and be engaged. Those people need you more than people who live in, San Francisco or Jersey City. Like there's all, not that they don't need support, but there's already a network there. But trust me, there's plenty of, in your most conservative area, there's still plenty of LGBT people there. They're there, we don't all congregate in one spot, in one spot, despite the stereotype. So, um, and also that's your community too. Like I love where I live. Like, so I understand that. Like life is not all politics. You can love living wherever you live. You can love Oklahoma. There are good stuff about it. So like, don't feel like you have to be. You can't be engaged. Of course, you got to be safe and consider things. I'm not saying that, but you know, don't think there's nothing you can do because there is. And if you're at Pride this month, which you should be, you'll know at least where we are. There's probably all kinds of political clubs out there that you can join. There, because the LGBTQ movement is very political for obvious reasons because we have to fight for rights. So um, just look around. And they're dying for people. Like literally they see walking by, they're like, please sign up. So sign up.
Yeah, very welcoming, very supportive, and very much in line with a lot of the feelings of most Americans these days.
Yes.
So now let's turn to the bill because this is something that we can actually start tonight in hopefully stopping. All of us have the opportunity to start calling senators at the
Being
bottom,
engaged.
being
Yep.
engaged. What we can do, and we'll talk about why it's important for us to stop the Senate voting on this bill. Um, is call them. I'll have a list of all the phone numbers for the DC offices for the senators. So we can start calling their offices, all the Republicans who would vote yes, tell them to vote no. They're looking at cutting Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP benefits for hungry children, marginalized communities, the most vulnerable people among us. And Donald's going to talk a little bit about the real impacts and how that will affect us.
Yeah, and I'll just give you guys, if you don't follow this every day like Alex and I do, which, is, it comes with this good and bad, but just so people know where we are. So, as we know, three branches of government, it's got to pass the House, the Senate, and then be signed by the president for our legislative process. And then, the Supreme Court, if it ever gets challenged, which we're not thinking about right now. But right now, you have the House and the Senate and the presidency controlled by Republicans who support this bill. It has passed, a version of the bill has passed the House that we'll talk about. So it needs to pass the Senate, which will be a different version because even among Republicans, there's disagreement about how far they want to take the cuts, how whether they want to cut Medicaid. For some people, it doesn't go far enough. For some people, it goes too far. There's a lot of debate. So the Senate is going to pass a different bill, most likely. And then it has to go through what's called reconciliation, where it has to pass again, both houses. So there's still opportunity to stop this bill. As of now, the bill is not good for, in my opinion, for marginalized communities and people with disabilities. It cuts Medicaid and it cuts the Affordable Care Act, sometimes called Obamacare, by getting rid of subsidies that Joe Biden passed back in his presidency that increased the subsidies for people with disabilities. So overall, it's about estimates are from 10 to 13 million people will lose health care the two um between the two cuts through Medicaid and through the Affordable Care Act. And they're going to do this one, they're just going to cut the Affordable Care Act subsidy. So that's straightforward. Medicaid, they try to get a little more, I call it, legislative gaslighting, where they say they're not cutting it, they're adding work requirements, which sounds good. Who doesn't like work? And well, the problem is it just ends up being a paperwork requirement because the most of the people on Medicaid, despite myths, are working, or they're taking care of somebody, or they have a disability, or they have some other reason why they're not working. So they that's their health care, and it actually helps people work in states that expanded Medicaid back when Obama passed the Affordable Care Act. Their employment actually went up because people with health insurance tend to work. It makes sense. When you have health care, it's easier to focus on work. But anyway, so work requirements would require you to prove that you're working to get Medicaid, which is just paperwork. And what happens, they tried this in states like Arkansas, is people just end up having trouble filling out the paperwork. The website doesn't work. It's really expensive to implement. So if you're more on the limited government side and don't like intrusive government, which I respect and appreciate, it it is very intrusive because you have to prove to government workers that you're working. The websites aren't working. So you end up losing your services and your benefits. Um, which requires people not to get their health care or putting off their health care, which ends up actually costing us money because if you wait to get health care, you end up costing us more money. So again, even if you're more of a fiscally conservative type person, you like your government nice and limited and you like, to save taxpayer money, none of that is in this bill. In fact, it adds to the deficit. Um, And that's why there are some conservatives who are opposing it on deficit grounds because it adds um, trillions of dollars to the deficit to pay for a tax cut for primarily uber wealthy people. So that's
Yeah.
in a nutshell.
Yeah, the whole point is for to justify billionaire tax cuts, to say that they're saving America money,
Right,
even though they're lying,
right,
because it's still running a deficit.
right.
Because the tax cuts are not going to be counterbalanced by taking away services
No, no, no.
that people rely on. And it's going to cost us, the American people, and our lives.
Right,
Cost us money, our lives, and rural hospitals specifically are
right.
going to be closing if they haven't already closed due to this bill, due to Republican
Yeah,
legislation.
that's a great point because Medicaid funds a lot of these, especially these rural hospitals. That's how they're able to stay afloat. And honestly, understandably, a lot of the people they serve, that's their insurance. So they can't stay in business if they can't get paid. They can't hire people if they can't get paid. It's hard enough. So, hospitals are going to close, which means people are not going to get health care, or they're going to have to travel really far distances to get health care, which is going to make things difficult. Also, Medicaid has been shown to save lives. There's been a lot of studies about this. So if you're consider yourself, you know, pro-life or very concerned about human life, Medicaid is your type of program as well. So it's very effective. And I think there's a lot of myths out there that there's a bunch of people just hanging out. It's people say it serves undocumented people, they say illegals, which I don't like that term, but that's their mantra. I prefer undocumented because people can't be illegal. So, but in some states, like where that myth comes from, and it's important to always do your research because sometimes these things that get repeated, I always say sometimes there's like a kernel of truth and then they take it and it's like exaggerated. So some states like New Jersey and California do pay for the children of so if you're an undocumented child and you came over with your undocumented parent through no fault of your own, you get health care. Not that undocumented person who brought you here. They can't get health care, but it makes sense that a state like New Jersey or California would want to pay for the health care of some child who came in through no fault of their own. Because if your parent brought you here, there's nothing you can do about it. Like you didn't know. You could make an argument that the parent knew the laws, but the child definitely did not know the laws, and that's not they didn't ask to be anywhere. So it's a very small portion of the state's budget. If you look it up, it's like the 0.5 or something of New Jersey's budget. I may not get that exactly right, but it's very small. And actually, again, it saves the state money. You might be like, Donald, that doesn't make sense. How's it save the state money? Well, these people are going to get health care regardless if you pay for it or not, because we're mandated rightfully, an emergency room can't turn you away because we are still a humane society in that way. We don't want people dying in the streets. Alex just gave me a look, but we still have that. So if you're concerned about cost, I would want somebody to get treated earlier. I would want them to go have a doctor and get treated earlier. So they don't go to the emergency room because that all the research indicates, and if you ever anybody in the medical field will tell you, the emergency room is the most expensive point of care. So so we want to treat people where they are. It saves people money, and undocumented people pay a lot into the system. So that's important to remember as well. So again, it has a kernel of truth in it. Do some states help people who are undocumented? Yes, but it's specifically their children, and it's a very small portion of their budget. So they're not a drain on the system. In fact, it's saving you money, and they're paying into the system, and their children. So that's always very important to me because I think people should be honest about their arguments. If you want to argue that children shouldn't get health care, it's a free country. Argue what you want. But I think even the most conservative person would have trouble making that argument, honestly, and um, not feeling off about
Yeah,
it.
and we know. Um, Republican Congressman Jeff Van Drew just came out the other day and admitted that the Republican Senate budget bill will cut American citizens' benefits,
Right,
Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP.
right. It's
It
important.
will,
It's yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, but the Medicare part's important too because this bill, as of now, triggers a provision in the law because it spent so much in the deficit where it makes automatic Medicare cuts. So that's important to know too because they run around and they'll say, "We're not cutting Medicare." Was talking about Medicare cuts, and my computer was so upset about it, it shut down. It was emotional about it, couldn't take it anymore. So yeah, it triggers a provision in the bill that automatically cuts Medicare, and that's important to remember too. And because it raises the deficit so high. So if you're like me and you don't like high deficits either, and I don't, so that's another reason why this is not a good idea.
and in Van Drew's admission, he referenced how the bill also, for whatever reason, probably only to cause pain to Americans, it limits the ability of for states to um, charge in taxes what
Right.
they charge right now or what they
Right.
collect right now.
Right. So they put taxes on providers, which allows them to expand services. And this is another because they know people supporting this bill know that it's unpopular to cut these programs because they're very popular across party lines. They're very popular across party lines, and Medicaid affects everybody. Somebody you love is on Medicaid, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Green Party, Libertarian. There's tons of people on Medicaid, pays for nursing home births, pays for a lot of things if you have a disability. So they know it's unpopular to say uh, we're cutting Medicaid, but they want their tax cut because it's very important to them. Um, it's their thing, and they need to pay for it somehow. So they can't come out and say we're cutting it. So they use terms like work requirements or like Alex said, changing the taxes they can put on providers because that doesn't look like a cut, right? You can say, oh, we're just you can kind of hide that a little bit. So it's pretty shrewd. That's why it is important to pay attention to Republican politics and understand kind of the thinking behind it because there is strategy involved in what they're doing because a lot of people will come up like and say, well, they're only adding work requirements, they're not doing cuts or, but they are. So it's important. At the end of the day, and I always say use some common sense. If they want to pay for a tax cut, which a lot of them do want to pay for to some degree, they're going to have to cut somewhere. And the budget is made up of defense, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Like those are the biggest provisions. Like it's anybody, Republican, Democrat, just being serious would say if you wanna cut things, that's where you look. It's not, that random person at Veterans Affairs who's dragging the deficit. It's these programs. So, and that Republicans don't like to touch defense most of the time. So where's it
And
come from?
and they're there to try to trick you and to earn your consent to punish you
Yes.
in their way of serving these wealthy donors,
Right, exactly.
because they need the money that's either going to you and
Right,
just taking that and giving it to
right.
either corporations or billionaires directly.
In fact, at one point, President Trump had a moment of clarity and he said, can't we save money by raising taxes on the rich a little? And Republicans stood up to him and said, "Absolutely not. We're doing the full tax cut." They're that committed to it. They let Trump have his way on a lot of stuff, but the Republican Party is essentially Trump and tax cuts. Like they are, if there's one thing, they agree on, it's tax cuts for um, extremely wealthy people.
And one of the biggest lies right now is the waste, fraud, and abuse line that the
Yes.
Republicans love to use now.
Yeah.
However, the government is constantly audited. We know that the government is constantly audited. All of these departments are audited for waste, fraud, and
Right.
abuse. Whistleblowers who have worked for Doge have come forth and said they have not found the waste, fraud, and abuse that they thought they would find. And this is while they were working for Doge. And after being transparent in the way that Elon Musk had preached, he was let go. He was fired.
Right. And the interesting thing about the Elon thing, because it does all tie together about this waste, fraud, and abuse, is Elon is what he did with all his cuts. It was eventually going to end up costing us money, or is it about equal out? Because the truth is, by the time you cut people, have to retrain them to do these jobs. They sue to get their jobs back, and ends up costing us money. And I'll tie that into this bill. Oh, that sounds really good. Waste, fraud, and abuse. But again, keeping people on the healthcare, you end up spending more money because they have to get their healthcare. They're
Yeah.
just going to get it more expensively.
And the department that they don't want to cut is the one department that always fails its audit by
Yes.
drastic percentages, which is the Pentagon.
Yes.
So
They, they, they're very protective of that. And also, you got to think about it too. Could you, in any program ever, is there waste and fraud? Sure. And do people want to get rid of that? I absolutely do. But there's a way to do it in a strategic, smart way. And you don't want to do these. What they do is these work requirements, and they're also going to increase certification for people on Medicaid, which that's why people lose their Medicaid a lot of times. As somebody that works with people with disabilities, it's all paperwork. Like if they have to do a certification every quarter, they have a hard enough time doing it every year because, just like anybody, especially people in vulnerable communities, it's overwhelming. Oh, I missed that. Something gets lost in the mail. And, people just end up losing their services. So you end up paying more and you end up not finding any waste, fraud, and abuse. I'm still waiting for that proposal where we can target that in a smart way. I might.
usually there's like prosecutions, usually there's
Yes,
accountability,
yes,
newspaper stories,
yes.
people in prison for decades.
Right.
But none of that has come out of Doe.
None of that has, and what that's not, again, it's like legislative gaslighting. That's not what they're suggesting. They're not suggesting, hey, we got proposal number 6 that'll target some waste or we can be more efficient here. They're suggesting cross the board cuts, making it harder for people to get health care to pay. That's what's actually happening, and that's why it's
And
important.
then in reality, they're also creating a market for profiters to fill and say, trust us with all your data and information. We'll file all this for you every month or
Yes,
every
and
3 months.
it's important to realize that in places like Arkansas, it again costs more money to implement these work requirements because you have to hire somebody to do that. You have to hire a private company to do it. You have to set up all the software. Like it doesn't equal out and it ends up costing our money. So look, I know that even if you're more like a person who's like, I do care about cost and I do care about waste, work requirements are a waste. Having people just fill out paperwork they don't need to is a waste. You know, that's a waste too. Like letting people just get their health care and live is actually the most efficient way to deliver health care. And it helps them focus on things that if you're making that argument, you should care about, which is working and living life and paying taxes. Again, they've done studies about this, that when part of Obamacare, the ACA was extending Medicaid, and it ended up helping people find jobs, which again, I'm going to say it makes sense because if you can if you can work and have health care and not be sick, you're more likely to work. So don't gonna they throw their hands up. They're like, look over here. Jeff Andrew and others said they're not cutting Medicaid, but they are. He promised a bunch of groups he's not cutting Medicaid. But I hope if he's listening, I still want to have faith in Jeff here. I think he has a chance to do the right thing, and he knows deep down that this is not the right bill. He knows that Medicaid should not be cut. So
And he knows many of his constituents are calling senators and calling House members and demanding that they not vote for this
that
bill.
they live up to their promise. So especially if you live in New Jersey, because we have a lot of key lawmakers. We have Jeff Andrew, who's a key vote. We have Chris Smith, who's a key vote. We have Tom Keene Jr., who's a key vote, and we still have they still represent some blue areas. So that's important to keep in mind. Don't surrender your voice. Don't go, oh, my phone call doesn't matter. It can matter. It can push them. You never know. And I always say, people are like, is it going to make a difference? You can't control everything. And you don't want to look back in this time because you can't control everything. If they're determined to pass the spell, they're going to pass the spell. But you want to be able to tell yourself you did what you could. And if all you can do is make a phone call, that's something. Make a phone call. You don't have to be mean. You don't have to sit there and go into a fight with some poor staff member who's probably against the bill deep down too. They're just trying to live their life. Just be like, tell the congressman, tell the congresswoman not to cut Medicaid. And if you have a representative who's against this bill and voting the right way, it's you can still call and tell that person thank you because those people need need to know they're supported too. Because as somebody that ran for office on a small level, what fuels you is people coming up to you and going, "I appreciate you doing this. I think that's so cool that you did this." I spoke out at a meeting. I was at a meeting yesterday, where I spoke out to Medicaid. At first, I thought, it was late, and I'm like, I don't want to go. Typical Donald. I have like a whole existential crisis before I go. It's the whole thing. And I went, and I got Alex understands me. That's why we click. Um, and I went and people came up to me and I spoke and people came up to me and said, I have somebody who's disabled in my life and I really appreciated what you said and I really appreciate like that's the stuff. So don't think, oh, I have a representative that's voting the way I like. I shouldn't call them. You should. Like let them know, you're in the fight and you know let them know that you care. So stay engaged. This bill is really important. This is going to change healthcare in America. It's the biggest transfer of wealth from the poorest to the richest ever. It's a huge transfer of wealth. It's like trickle up economics.
At the time when like wealth inequality is the most drastic
Yes,
in
well, we're
history.
gonna help you out. We're gonna help speed that along. If you really
And only at the expense of starving children and elderly who are also going to be victimized by this bill through the SNAP cuts.
right.
This is food assistance for people with no other options.
And again, I'll sit there and say it's not even going to accomplish conservative goals. It's going to grow the government and grow the deficit. So you can make more progressive arguments. You can make a straight up conservative argument against this bill. It's a disaster. A lot of them don't know what's in it. I think they're still in the bill. At one point, there was this is a good one. I like this one. There is a ban on states regulating artificial intelligence for 10 years. Which I mean, I don't know about you, but I mean, I love some AI. I think it's got great potential, but I think it should be regulated because it's got some potential negative effects. And one of the representatives, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene there of Georgia, said she wouldn't know, she didn't know it was in the bill. She didn't know it was in the bill because this is another point that's such a disaster. They're just trying to shove it through. They're trying to shove it through and hope you don't notice.
Yeah.
Not even Marjorie Taylor Greene noticed. And so, see, hope that you're not engaged, but you can stop this, and you definitely want to try. You definitely
And
want.
a lot of these things were laid out in Project 2025 too.
Right, and
So,
everybody, if you didn't read it, I actually read most of it, and it really was a blueprint. Print. Now it's on audio version. I think it's on Spotify now, and it's on.
oh, audio.
So you should listen to it, and take these people seriously. Like they do have, you don't even have to get into like good person, bad person. Like you can't get in people's heads, whatever. Some people that are doing this honestly believe they're doing the right thing for all of the world. But it's take them seriously. Like they are serious about their ideas. They think that, Medicaid is too large and they're annoyed by it and they think it would be better if it was small, if people had less health. Like that's what they think. Like you can I disagree with that. Alex doesn't disagree, but people get so caught up in, I can't believe they believe this. Like they're telling you they believe.
And in a lot of ways, they're also just paid to vote that way.
Right, right. And
Like
they have all different types of incentives. Alex brought up donations, that influences you. They have a whole political culture of that they've been Republicans their whole life. They go along with it. Like there's a whole think tanks and wealthy organizations that fund it. Project 2025 was created by the Heritage Foundation, which is funded by all kinds of rich people who pursue their interests. It's just that's politics, and you have to push back and be engaged in it too. And it's just important because this slow stuff of like calling people, being involved, being engaged, that's how politics works. I know that a lot of people, and I'm going to call out my progressive friends, they just want like they're supposed to go out and they make a vote, and then the world is supposed to open up and progressivism is supposed to ensue. But like that's not how it works. You got to build slowly at a time if you're attending these protests. No kings was very important. And people sometimes say, what's the point of protesting? It doesn't change anything. Like it doesn't change anything right away, right at this moment, but it's how you build political power and slowly start to crawl back power. And that's what the people who write Project 2025 do. They would take two steps forward, one step back, two steps back, one step forward. And they would, a lot of them, Trump was barely a Republican before he got elected, but they pushed power and they found a vessel and they pushed their agenda through. So progressives have to think a little more like that in terms of power. And people, oh, making a call will make a difference. It's slowly putting those building blocks together. You know,
building democracy back into the fabric of
yeah,
America takes work. And
right,
it takes work by the demos, by the population.
right. And
Um,
it's not always like it's never a straight line. It's not always like pretty and like you know, we're gonna sing at a YouTube concert and like it's just like it's you gotta push and you gotta make alliances with maybe people you disagree with on other things. Like for me, I always say like if conservatives who are really concerned about the deficit, the few that exist, if they get rid of this bill, I'm all for it. I don't care why I don't care why it ends. I'll make temporary alliances with those people, and
yeah,
we'll argue about the other stuff later. You know,
and in reality, even if Republicans are telling us it's like Republicanism or nothing, or the Democrats and Democratic policy is the devil.
I think what basically you were saying is we have to remember that like it's possible for us to get power back again, and like you have to slowly build at it. Like that's what I keep going back to. And you're seeing that. You're seeing. I always say that one of the things I've noticed in the last few months, especially this bill is very unpopular, and I would say the vibe has shifted from where it was in 2024. Where if I was honest with myself. I knew that the Democrats were gonna lose because I could just tell the vibe and the culture was very like, anti Biden, anti the Democratic Party. It was like
But
very
this moment too kind of feels maybe the most like Bernie
yes, yeah, I
2016-ish.
agree. I agree.
And
That's what I mean. It's like the
the
vibe is
the
shifting.
sides aren't MAGA and Democrat. It
Right, right.
seems like it's more obvious that it's, the billionaire class against the
Right,
rest of us.
right, exactly.
And we're really on our own right now.
Yes, but you're seeing that at the No Kings protest. You're just seeing that energy shift, whereas that energy and we can build on that, and that's how the Republicans do it, and the conservative movement did it. And so don't think it's over because I'm gonna keep pushing for this. So they passed this bill, so we're gonna, if they pass it, we're gonna elect people to repeal it and elect people to change it and elect people to stop provisions from kicking in that take a while to kick in. So, it's not, don't give up your power because part of authoritarianism is part of it is it's not really as strong as people think, but a lot of it is convincing people that it's stronger than you think and convincing people not to care. I always think
Yeah.
of, author, authoritarians like, you know, I just heard a snippet on the news by a commentator who I forget, but it's so true, and I really liked it. It was, people like Putin, they don't say their system isn't corrupt. They say every system is corrupt. They want to get you to be cynical and get you not to care. That's what it. Because he doesn't care if you. He doesn't care if you're if you're again, he would rather have you not engaged. Like that's his perfect time. Like, oh, you don't care? Let me take care of it. So, if you believe that change can happen, that's where you're dangerous to the people in power. When you start going, nothing matters, nothing matters. You don't like the Democratic Party? Come join and change the Democratic Party. Come be a part of it. Like, come be a part of it. Just going, oh, there's nothing matters. I always get stopped. It was like that just helps them win. And that's
Yeah, you need to find a place where you can be effective, can change, and then you have to go with that. You have to
you
grow from there. It is a
have to,
growth.
you you have to grow from there. And I mean, using Bernie as a good example, a lot of Bernie's positions before he started running were seen as really radical, and they become more mainstream in the Democratic Party now. You can shift it, even though Bernie didn't win. He shifted a lot of the positions. Now Medicare for all is a lot more accepted. That
Bernie 2016
yeah,
made it so that Biden could stand in front of Congress and pretty much lead the Republicans into giving up on cutting
right,
Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid
right,
because
exactly.
it was that ingrained in the American
Yeah,
just
exactly.
consciousness and experience, and it's part of what we protect and what we see as our our
Fabric.
freedom, our
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
especially in retirement.
right,
This can't take away people's ability to retire. People on Medicare and Medicaid are already struggling
right.
to make ends meet.
Right, and it's what allows people to be free. Like if you're worried about where you're getting your health care, you're really not. It's hard to be free and concentrate on that other things. If you're worried about how you're going to retire, it's hard to be free and concentrate on other things. The safety net is what allows people to be free. Like freedom is not only government leaving you alone, in my opinion. It's having a basic safety net so you don't have to be um at the mercy of the private market. And I'm not even that anti, I love a good private market when they're good at doing the things they're good at. But just being at the whim of certain industries is another form of tyranny. So you need to really just pay attention to everything going on. Don't get cynical. Get more engaged. And
And while other first world nations are thinking about how they can increase the quality of life, we're literally here fighting to just maintain a diminished quality of life
yeah,
in the American experience.
yeah,
So really think about these things when politicians tell you that they want to destroy government programs, and that's them telling you they want to effectively destroy the functioning of our government. They want to
right,
destroy the functioning of our
right,
society. They
right,
don't care about increasing the quality of life in our society. They think we're not worthy of it.
right,
And we don't deserve it, but
right.
the billionaires deserve more tax cuts.
That's the thing. They always seem to come out. They always seem to come out okay. And that's a great way to think about it in terms of, um, it's not even, we're not even really having discussions anymore about how to make people's lives better. We're just having like discussions about how to tear things down. And replace it with nothing. And, I know sometimes it gets popular, people get cynical about the government. I get it, and there are a lot of problems with some government programs and a lot of things I would, change and all this. But really think about it. Everybody seems to bash the government until you tell them, "Oh, so you want me to take away Social Security?" They're like, "No." "You want me to take away Medicaid?" "No." "You want me to take away Medicare?" "No." "You want me to take away SNAP?" "Oh, we do need that." So really think about what you're saying when you hear this like rhetoric of everything the government does is terrible, and if that tracks with your actual life experience.
And whether we like the idea of it or not, we are in a social contract with the government
Right,
just by fact of being citizens and living on this land.
right,
And to say and tell yourself that you deserve nothing and you deserve to be punished for engaging in this contract while they have rights over you, um, I would think about that and see how comfortable you are with that.
right. And
Because
also under
this society deserves a basic minimum experience that supports life.
right, and also understand that the Republican Party in their current incarnation does not want to reduce government at all. In this bill is tons of defense spending. It's got tons of immigration spending. If you are concerned, as I am, about these mass deportations that are happening, that are all immoral, and also I always have that not only horribly immoral and wrong, but also very expensive. Like I always want to throw that back. Also very expensive, also costing us money, costing us jobs, growing the government. You have agents wearing masks, not identifying themselves, which is, I'm a very pro law enforcement person, actually, but everybody should be uncomfortable with law enforcement are public servants, and you should be any uncomfortable with anybody from the government coming over and with a mask on, so and not identifying themselves. That's what happens in authoritarian countries. So again, that's in this bill as well. And that costs a ton of money. That costs a ton of money. So, it's just important to keep an eye on this and the project that they have laid out. And it's all about essentially using the government to make life harder for marginalized populations and then cutting taxes and regulations on the super rich. So that's basically the project in a nutshell. Like big government for people like the LGBTQ community and minority communities, and small, leave me alone government for super, super rich uh, people. So that's
And Republicans love to use this line of argument, and it actually might just show us a little bit into their planning that they're not talking about. But they are always accusing Democrats of saying that, you allow this, then they're gonna want that and that and that and that.
right.
Well, you let them cut this,
Yes,
and they're
they're
gonna
going
cut everything.
right, and
It's
they're
all
gonna
just gonna be privatized. It's all gonna be beyond the purview and visibility and transparency of the US people.
right, and that is their ultimate project. They do want to privatize things like Social Security, and like that is what they want to do. They think it'll run better. They think it'll give them more power, whatever the reason. Like that, they'll tell you. They will tell you this stuff all day long. It's not a big secret. But I appreciate Project 2025 because it really is all out there. Like it is right out there. So, like understand what's going on. The bill, you can find out stuff about it. You can Google it. Things pop up right away. New York Times, Washington Post. There's great resources out there. Alex is gonna, I'm sure, link to a few things, but keep an eye on this. Call your representatives. Stay engaged. This is their big bill, and they're gonna try and pass it with everything they got because they need to run on something before the midterms. They need to say we did something. And if they pass, one, we got to stop them from passing it. And two, if they do pass it, we got to make sure we hold them accountable for passing it.
And while we're at it, we have to start making demands. So tell
Yes,
them what you want to see in the bill.
yes,
Protections for Medicare, Medicaid,
yes,
expansions, like
right. Right.
We can't forget to demand the way that they
Yeah,
also.
yeah. And also like, even putting in pressure, and if you can make this bill like 2% less bad, that's a win. Like that's why pressure is important too. If you can make it 2% less, it's still gonna be bad, but less bad is less bad. And you know,
And they're stuffing this into a budget bill. They're
yes,
not passing legislation. They're
right.
using the American budget bill
Yeah.
to fill with whatever like donor wish list item that they need to put in
Yeah.
there
Yeah,
so that
this is
this is
important.
their fundraising for 2022
Yeah, this is important too, Alex. You made a great
or
point.
2020, whatever.
You made a great point that they're using a process called budget reconciliation, which is a viable process, but they only need 51 votes in the Senate to get it through, because normally there's a filibuster in the Senate, which I'm not a big fan of, but normally you have to hit 60 votes, and this is a way to bypass that. So that's why it's important and why every vote does count, because they only need 51 votes, and
And
um.
I touch on that because Republicans attack Democrats of doing that.
Yes, of course
And
they
they
do.
love to attack Democrats for that.
Of
So
course they
here we
do.
go.
Of
We
course they
have
do.
to we have to throw it back, right?
Yeah, you definitely, yes, I agree with all that too. You have to make it an issue. You have to educate people. And don't accept premises when people say it's only a work requirement. Tell them it's a paperwork requirement. And it just ends up costing people money. Like there's data. We tried this. Conservative states did do work requirements on Medicaid. Like it was a disaster. It cost money and it led to people dying and
And this
losing
is
their jobs.
already in addition to all the job cuts through the programs that they've already
Right.
carried out, which effectively hampers the ability of the department to serve the American people
Which ends up costing money and costing you services. So,
and lives.
and lives as well. So it's all very important to keep an eye on, because the arguments are very weak against for it, and you have to do your best as citizens to expose them. And I know there's a lot of misinformation out there, and you can't combat everything because social media, but put your energy where you can, especially if you live in these key districts. Um, so give them a call.
And for New Jersey, this is a really important time to get involved because we have a governor's
Yeah,
election coming up in November. And if the Democrats do not win that, we have Mikey Sherrill.
yeah,
Um, the Republicans will just let the Trump administration rule New Jersey the way
yeah.
he's ruling these other states.
Yeah, they are very pro. The Republican running for governor, Jack Ciattarelli, is very pro-Trump. And if he wins, Trump can fairly say, "Well, they wanted me," because they vote. That's part of politics too. The momentum it creates. So it gives Trump more. It gives them more of a power to implement Trump-like policies in New Jersey, because they can say, "Look, we had an election. I didn't I didn't run away from Trump and I won. So I should get to implement the policies I want to implement." So that's important too. It's about, and unfortunately in politics, politicians are sometimes, after they lose an election, not brave about things. So they try to go along with it, and even people who you wouldn't expect go along with certain things to get on what they see as the right side of public opinion. So that's why it's all important. Get engaged in New Jersey and keep following what's going on. And be realistic, but stay positive too. I always say I'm a realistic optimist. Like I accept reality, but I believe it can be better. I don't think that pessimism and negativity has a very good track record a lot of times. I don't think it's very realistic, honestly, that things are always bad all the time and things cannot get better. And if you want to do this work, you have to believe things can get better, or you can just believe it's worth doing regardless of the outcome. Because that's where I am in my life. Like that's my phase. I spoke yesterday, like I said, in favor of them passing a resolution. If they pass it or not, I still think it's a win because I tried. So I can sleep fine, um, knowing I did that. So thanks, Alex, for having me. Anything else?
Yeah. No. It's great to see Donald Campbell still fighting
We're still
for
fighting.
legislation, fighting for change in Jersey. And we're really glad that you came back to educate us a little bit about the bill and to get us ready to pick up the phone and start calling these senators because there's a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
And hopefully, a lot of people in our audience will start to get a little bit more involved. And then maybe, we can support you on a ticket one day too.
yeah, maybe. Who knows? Who knows? We'll see what happens. But please concentrate on this bill. Make phone calls. Do emails. You can make a phone call. If you can do a text, my young people out there, you'll be okay. I know some of you got a little phone anxiety, but it's a good
Emails, phone
emails.
calls.
But making that phone call, only way to overcome anxiety is to do things that make you anxious. So make those phone calls. People are very nice when you call, and just be nice back. And you don't have to do a soliloquy and play. In fact, don't do the soliloquy. Just say, please vote against this bill. And it's really important to me, and Medicaid's really important to me. And then like move on. You don't need to go through, you know, I quote the Congressional Budget Office.
No, and for the most part, chances are you're gonna get an answering machine, so
Right, right, right.
don't be
Right.
too afraid.
But they take those messages and staff does monitor calls. They
Yeah.
know which way the wind is blowing. So it's important. Like, don't think it doesn't matter. It
Yeah.
does. It does. It
It
does.
got Jeff Van Drew to backtrack before he even
Yeah.
has to vote on it
Yes.
again.
So
So
you want to turn that pressure up. You want to turn
admissions, backtrackings, this is
all
why
that
we're
and all
here.
that stuff, instead of being like it doesn't make a difference, that's a sign of progress. If he's dancing, if he's I don't know, I'm not sure on that. That
He
means
might be switching back over.
yes, that means that he is feeling the pressure because if he wasn't, he wouldn't be concerned.
Yeah.
If he was hearing phone calls that everybody was saying, this is awesome, he'd be like holding the sign and saying, I'm voting for this, but he's not.
Oh, and we know it.
Yes, yeah. So keep it up. Keep it up. You can make change. It's the only way change ever happens is people getting engaged. So keep it up.
Well, thank
Thanks,
you so
Alan.
much, Donald. Have a great rest of your night.
You're
Everyone, check
welcome.
out the details for the links to different articles to Donald's website with the Atlantic Center of Independent Living. And then you can check out the full article on 4elementspress.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss a video from myself, Donald, or
Yes.
any of the other creators.
I'll always watch Alex's interviews. He's awesome. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Take care. Bye.